Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Living Astrology with Janet Hickox. It's time to grab your cup of coffee or your tea, sit back and relax so we can chat about what is happening up in the stars above for the weekend. And happy Friday to everybody. Recognizing some of you out there may be of a religious sort, it is Good Friday. That means that Sunday is Easter. So, however you celebrate this annual spring event, may it bring you joy and peace and lots of love and laughter. Our family is getting together on Sunday, not because we celebrate Easter, we just like to get together. And the kids now are kind of grown up, so they don't even want to really hunt for Easter eggs so much. We may still do that though, because it's kind of fun to do it. So hopefully you all are doing well this morning, because we have actually a kind of quiet weekend. There are no big transits for us to talk about. Today, we're going to get an opportunity then to go into a little bit of teaching energy, right? So I'm going to pull on my teacher's cap and we're going to talk a little bit about the human design centers. And the centers are where all of the energy is moved through in our body. So it is where all of the gates reside. And each of those gates, of course, has a connection to our DNA and the traits that are expressed or potentially expressed in our DNA. And we can take a look at the way the center is configured in your own chart to help you understand what does a transiting sun and earth mean to you. So my suggestion this morning is to have your human design chart handy, right? Have it at the ready. And because this is a sort of teaching day, I am ready to answer questions for people. So I'll be looking in the chat for questions. And even if you want to ask a question about your own personal chart, we may be able to take the time to do that today as well, since we don't have a whole lot to talk about astrologically. But we do have a couple of things to talk about. So, for one thing, today, the moon is in the sign of Scorpio and ready to go into the void, which it will do at 8:41 a.m. So while we're chit-chatting this morning, the moon will be moving into its void and where it will stay until 12:53 p.m. my time today. So what would that be? 3:53 p.m. for those of you on the East Coast. Yep. And then it will move out of Scorpio and into the sign of Sagittarius. So we'll talk about what that means for us. So then for the weekend, the whole of the weekend, until later in the evening on Saturday or Sunday, the moon will be transiting through the sign of Sagittarius. But there's a concept that we talk about, especially in astrology. I don't think we talk about this so much in human design, about when the moon comes to the end of its transit through a sign and it enters into the void. We call it the void of course. It just means that the moon is not making any new contacts to any other planets before, or to any angles before it moves on into the next sign. And it's a bit of a wandering moon, right? Not a lot can get done during that period of time when the moon is in that void. And mostly that's because if there's just no new the moon kind of shows us the energy, catalyzes in a way, not like Mars, but catalyzes timing, right? In a way that gets things moving or keeps things moving. So it's a timekeeper sort of, right? You only need to look at the sky every night to see how the moon helps us keep track of time and where we are in the lunar cycle by the size of the moon, right? The way she looks. So at this point in time, when the moon is ready to move into the void, we take a look at the last aspect that the moon is making to another planet, because that energy is left with us for the whole time of the void. And our void today is about 4 hours, right? So we're left with a last aspect, what happens to be the moon in a trine or a harmonious flow of energy with Neptune, right? Neptune's in Pisces, the moon in Scorpio, both water signs. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what that means. We don't always get to talk about this because the voids sometimes are, I've seen them be 1 minute long, right? So there's not a lot of wandering time. I've seen the void be 12 hours long. right? So that's a longer period of time. So today we're going to sit with a harmonious alignment at 8:41 my time, so 11:41 for those of you on the East Coast. And for that next 4 hours we're sitting with the moon in the trine to Neptune. And this is very favorable. This is a favorable aspect. So, first of all, transiting moon in Scorpio is a water sign and it's known for its intensity, its depth of emotions, its emotional power, right? Scorpio, that's the sign. When the moon is here, then emotions run deep, right? They tend to run deep, and there's this strong current of emotional energy, a desire even for emotional connection that we all have, for intimacy, for getting closer to one another. And this placement can bring out feelings of passion and also the desire for transformation. Scorpio is a sign of transformation, right? Its symbols, the scorpion, the eagle, and the phoenix, really show us the levels of transformation that that Scorpio energy brings. And whether you are a Scorpio or not, you have Scorpio somewhere in your chart, right? So you have access to this scorpionic, this passionate, this intense, this transformational energy, wherever it is in your personal chart, is where this is happening, right, for you. Now, transiting Neptune in Pisces, Neptune is the planet of dreams, spirituality, illusion, escapism, and he's in his own sign, right? He's the ruler of the sign of Neptune. So his energy is kind of potent here, and it has been, right? He's not newly here. He is actually a year from ending his transit through his own sign. But he is heightening our intuition, our instinct, our empathy, our search for spiritual meaning, our ability even to access our higher self through dreams, perhaps, or through psychic awareness. So, Pisces being that sign of sensitivity through the emotions, through our psychic awareness, we have a lot of this um, fostering of that deeper connection to our inner selves during a transit of a Neptune in Pisces. And Neptune also rules the collective unconscious as well as Pisces, right? Pisces is the collective unconscious as well. So it can enhance our connection to creativity that impacts the bigger picture, imagination, and other spiritual paths, kind of seeing the bigger spiritual picture. And the trine, which remember I said it's the moon in Scorpio trine. A trine in a chart looks like a triangle. If you're looking at the symbols in the grid, right? The grids of the astrology charts show the different symbols that, like, there's a trine right there, right? Moon to Venus, right? Um, but we're talking about the last aspect the moon is making today, and it's going to hang with us then for the 4 hours of the moon's transit through, finishing through Scorpio. And the trine is considered positive and harmonious, and it indicates a flow, an ease, and a flow of the energies between the two bodies, in this case, the moon and Neptune. And when the moon in Scorpio forms that trine with Neptune, it enhances both our already deeply emotional selves and our deeply intuitive qualities, right? So we become deeply in tune, right? And in a way that becomes a little bit dreamy, meaning some of you might be feeling wide awake and some of you might be feeling awake, but you're still sort of wandering in your minds, right? Or you're sort of in this dreamy space. So the themes of a moon in a trine are about being more attuned to the subtle energy. So the subtle emotional field, the subtle psychic field, just being more sensitive to what other people are experiencing, to information that's coming through. And it has the potential in these 4 hours that the trine is activated for some deep healing in our emotions and in our psychic field, right? In our intuitive field. And that's partly because this aspect sort of triggers the need for more introspection. So we're more willing and able to go on the inner tour, right? Seeing what's going on in our inner minds. And then for us to release emotional baggage, right? Letting go of the grievances, of the places of unforgiveness, of the dis-ease that we feel with one another at times. And this is also creative and inspirational energy. So if you have the opportunity for those 4 hours today, take and use it in a most creative and imaginative way. It might be surprising and shocking as to how those two coming together can create a pathway through to some emotional breakthroughs, perhaps, or through some very creative energy. It is a time for us to have a greater capacity for compassion and empathy for one another. And it also holds the potential for escapism. Luckily, I have a busy day, so I won't be so tempted to go off into la la land. um, Generally, it's a positive escapism. Maybe I get lost in a book, or I get lost in a works of art. I get lost in a piece of music. Um, so it's not like negative escapism, but it's gotta be still grounded energy. If it's not grounded, then it's just something where we're scattering everything, our energy, our time, our focus on things sort of wanes. So, all in all, it makes it a very difficult 4 hours of the day to do anything of consequence, right? It's just not gonna be that way. We can it could be a time of deepening our intuition and our emotional connections, but taking action in the world that we live in can seem very difficult, like treading through deep water, right? Have you ever had those dreams where you're trying to run, but you can't, right? You can't seem to get the momentum going. So that is the 4 hours or so that we have today. It is definitely more of a time for introspection, for emotional healing, for tuning into your intuition, connecting to the deeper realms of yourself, of your hidden self, perhaps. But definitely is going to be a little more difficult to take action in the business world, for example. Might be great for meetings where we're just kicking around ideas and brainstorming, but definitely not necessarily the time for taking bold action or doing, taking those next steps. And I want you to understand that this is the nature of the world that we live in, right? It's a breathing, taking in and a breathing out, letting it go, taking action, taking it in and going more inward and then letting it out. So while we're in a season of Aries where we have lots of potential for taking action and being bold and moving forward, we also have these other times where the energy shifts, even if it's just for 4 hours, into a more introspective, inward focused energy. So being aware of the natural rhythms of the planets, not that they force you or cause you anything to do, but they are as above, so below. We can chart what's going on in the outer and know that it's also going to be affecting us here on this plane, right, in this third dimensional world. So knowing that sometimes, it is just what it is, a time to slow things down. It doesn't mean forever, just the 4 hours or so today, because after that, void is broken at 12:53 p.m., so almost 1 o'clock p.m. on the West Coast here. The moon moves into Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is a completely different animal from Scorpio, right? We go from deep water to fire, to mutable fire. So the idea of passion, igniting our passions. And so the movement of the moon into Sagittarius will be a noticeable shift in our emotional energy, but also in our focus for the rest of the day. So, for one thing, Sagittarius is a sign known for optimism, right? And enthusiasm. It's fire. It's fire. And it's known for those qualities and also as an adventurous spirit, right? Sagittarius holds that energy of exploration and adventure and challenges us to get outdoors and get into the natural world. It is very expansive energy. So the moon here is expanding our inner world. And we may feel more optimistic about the future and be drawn to new experiences or new adventures, things that we haven't done before, right? Or exploring new topics. We don't have to necessarily get in our vehicles and go flying away to somewhere. Nope, we can do that just through the things that we focus our energy on during the day, and actually for the whole weekend. Right? Did I say that? I think I did. That Sagittarius is where the moon will be from 12:53 p.m. today until 9 p.m. Sunday night, West Coast time. So midnight for those of you on the East Coast before the moon transits into Capricorn. And while the moon is in the sign of Sagittarius, we might feel a more desire for freedom because it's associated with freedom and independence. So during the transit, sometimes people feel a strong desire to break free from the old patterns, from the routines, from the restrictions that we've placed upon ourselves. Anything that is of the norm might feel confining. There's a need then for spontaneity and a willingness to get out and do things differently, right? Both mentally, physically, emotionally, right? This is a sign that's desirous of the different, the new, right? Now, also Sagittarius and the moon, especially here in Sagittarius, is on a search, a seek, right? The energy of Sagittarius is seeking energy, right? It seeks truth, it seeks the answers to life's biggest questions, it seeks meaning. So, meaning and truth. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. So now we're linking the moon and Jupiter together. And there's where our expansive energy is. This is also a sign of higher learning, right? Seeing things from the higher perspective. So when the moon is in Sagittarius, sometimes we get on that quest for meaning, for looking for truth, for finding wisdom, being wise, becoming wiser. And that can manifest as a desire to engage in more philosophical discussions, talking with one another about subjects that maybe we don't normally talk about, exploring different belief systems, perhaps, or embarking on a journey of your own personal growth and evolution, right? Restlessness is another aspect here, restlessness and impulsivity. Sagittarius is still fire. Fire is spontaneous energy. It is ignition that then leads to action. So it's generally positive ignition and action in the sign of Sagittarius. But if there's no outlet for some of the exploring, adventurous, truth seeking energy, it can become very restless and impulsive, then, right? If I can't find an outlet, I might just say or do things that are impulsive and not necessarily of a positive nature. Some people might feel scattered in their minds or unfocused. Um, the idea here is to not rely so much on the mind, but follow the body's impulses, right? The body's impulses. Aim for the truth. Sometimes that's a mental process, other times it's much more physical. And the need to get out into nature, right? To do something in the garden, to take a walk, a bike ride, go out for a hike. That's your energy for the weekend. Now, also, Sagittarius is known as a sign for bluntness, honesty, right? Honest communication. It's frank, it's direct. When the moon is sent in Sagittarius, there are emotions to be concerned with here. And the emotions here can be expressed more openly, for sure, but because we're hunting for authenticity, for honesty, for truth, right? However, sometimes this can lead to blunt or tactless insensitiveness or insensitivity to what other people are feeling. So we have to be careful in our communication, right? We don't want to blurt things, right? Remember the golden rule of human designs, the throat center, it has to be invited out of you, right? If it's invited out of you, then the other person will receive the message, but you can still temper what you say, right? You don't have to say it in a tactless way. Be considerate of other people's feelings during this weekend. There's the love of adventure because Sagittarius is associated with travel and exploration. It's the ruler of the ninth house of the astrology chart, which is an expansive, looking at the higher self, the bigger answers to the bigger questions of life. So we might be drawn to do more adventurous things, right? Going out, traveling further away from our home base. Um, Dealing with things of other cultures, right? Learning about other cultures. Like if you're someone that always eats Mexican food and that's the extent of your cultural diversity as far as food is concerned, this might be a weekend to try Thai food or try some kind Vietnamese food or something different from what you normally try. People might also be drawn to outdoor activities, especially if the weather, it's springtime now, right? The weather's starting to get better. We're drawn more to be outdoors. The last thing I said to my husband this morning was maybe we should put the umbrellas up this weekend, the patio umbrellas, so we could sit outside, right, without a lot of sunshine on us. Um, so it's the experiences that broaden our horizons that we're actually interested in this weekend, but also the philosophical reflection. Some of you may be more connected to something that you're learning and you want to take it deeper. So, a contemplation is another word we could use here. Contemplation of the higher philosophical view of life, of your own life, of your purpose. Those kinds of things are all big deals for this weekend. So, overall, the transiting moon for the weekend as it sits in Sagittarius is a time of optimism, a time for exploring and expansion. Um, you know, get caught up in the spirit of adventure and be willing to look for meaning in places you might not normally look for it. It's a favorable time for us of the month for growth, for learning and embracing new opportunities. So overall the weekend in terms of the astrological outlook is really positive, with the moon being in Sagittarius and no other major transits happening. It leaves it open for us to do and be things that we don't normally get to do and be. So, play with it, right? Be playful. Fire energy is kind of playful energy, and it doesn't have to be destructive, right? Fire can be very useful when it's contained, right? When it has a purpose. Okay. Let's say good morning to people who are showing up this morning. Chester's mom, hello to you. Good morning, Christine Buckingham and Debbie. Tibbetts Tumiel, hello, Amy D. Teddy, good Friday to you too. Good Friday. Pam Zaruba, good Friday, everyone. Have a happy Easter. Thank you very much. Terry Strauss, good morning. Um, Chester's mom says, my dog pal Chester is a Scorpio. Interesting. I wonder how that affects an animal. Probably very impacted by your own emotions or by the people that live in the home's emotions or people who come to visit, right? Dogs are kind of open intuitively like that. Good morning, Patty. And Christine says, "Oh, give Chester a hug from his this Scorpio moon." I love that. Terry, good morning. I'm glad that you could join us. Jolie, hello to you. Asa, glad to see you out there. And Terry says, e-bike ride indeed. And Terry Strauss, oh, I blurt. Yes, you do, but that's okay because you don't do it maliciously. I think sometimes we just need to preface it with, I'm going to be blunt in saying this, so don't get your feelings hurt, but blah. Or you might have to say, look, I tend to be very blunt in the way that I say things. It's not meant to hurt your feelings. So let me apologize ahead of time. You could do that, right? But also, if you're blunt, Terry Strauss, when it comes to working with clients who've paid you or asked you to do a reading for them, that's a different story, right? The invitation is implied there, and it would be your job, if you will, to be that way for that person, to show up that way for that person. All right. Um, Chester's mom says he loves hugs and he is a super sensitive guy, very, right, to where his tummy may get upset when there's a lot of emotion running through the house, or he can become very clingy. Yeah, that happens to people who are Scorpios, right? They can easily get upset because of the emotional tenor of what's happening around them. So, all right. Now, we're going to transition over to human design. So, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to be putting up the human design chart of the information we're going to be talking about today. Now, the chart I'm going to show you may look different from the one that maybe I have sent you previously. So, don't get disturbed by that. It's just a different way of showing the information. And having your own chart in front of you helps you to learn more about yourself through human design, right? Because I'm going to be talking about general terms for sure, but you can also take those general things and apply them to what you see in your own chart. All right, so just a moment here while I get my screen up into presentation mode and a window. There we go. Hold on, my thing is taking its time. Circle going round and round. Technology, remember too, we are in a run up to Mercury retrograde. So let me go back to here. Let's see. Okay, so you are seeing the chart. Okay, good. It's weird because for me, the wheel was going round and round, making me think you weren't seeing the chart, but now you are seeing the chart. So, what I wanted to talk about human design today is the fact that the sun and earth are making a move tomorrow, right? Today, we finished the transit that we've already talked about, but tomorrow, we're moving into another combination of gates that give us an opportunity to talk about two very delicate um, centers within your human design. So remember, as I said in the beginning of the show this morning, the centers field all of the energy, right, that's coming through around certain themes. So, for example, the sun is sitting in the will or the heart center, right? And that center fields the managing and allocating of resources, our will, our determination, and it is a motor energy, and that motor energy is comes in pulses, like pulses or not waves necessarily, but a pulse, and the pulse is on and you have more energy for doing things where you can use will and you can use determination, and then it pulses off. Humans typically miss the off pulse. Animals don't. Right? Animals don't miss the off pulse. They lay down or they go eat. They snooze, right? They don't miss the off pulse. But humans, we have willpower that we use most of the time incorrectly that pushes us to keep going, right? Keeps pushing us, pushing us. And we miss the pulse, the off pulse, which means then we're digging into energy that we maybe don't have. We're undermining our own ability to have sustainable energy. And over time, this particular center can lead us to burnout, right? So we want to be very careful and very aware of everything that's going on in our will centers. Now, in a moment, I'm going to go back to the center itself and I'll talk about what it looks like if it's colored in on your chart, which it would be red, most likely, or this purpley color that I have here. And what it looks like for you if it's open, meaning it's white, like some of these other centers here. All right. So now I want to talk about the gate that the sun is sitting at. So you'll note here the gate, this is the gate 21. And the gate 21 is called control. In quantum human design, it is called self regulation. So it is related to ego because this is sometimes also called the ego center. It is related to willpower and the drive, and it emphasizes then certain key energies around leadership or direction, authority. In fact, in the gene keys, the gift of this gate 21 is called authority. In the shadow, it's called control. So, what does it mean when it's transiting? Transiting meaning it's only activated from March 30th until, oh, I need to get my April map out. From March 30th until April 3rd, so Wednesday. And the gate of control is really interesting because if it gets defined for us, we suddenly want to assert ourselves and take charge of our lives or take charge of situations around us. And using willpower to demonstrate our ability to lead can feel more like control or being controlled or controlling, right? So we have to watch out. But we may each feel more apt to want to take control of our destiny, of our life purpose, of our ability to take decisive action to achieve our goals, right? So it could be used in the positive when we are calling up our authority, our knowingness, our willingness to take and make decisions that are right for us, that we've considered through in human design, what we would say is our strategy and our authority. So it's important to note, though, that this energy can get twisted up and it can manifest positively through our claim on our personal authority and using that to empower others rather than the negative, which is about domination or control, trying to control other people's um, behaviors, control what they do, what they can do, what you won't let them do, that kind of thing. And when the sun is transiting through here, as it will be for those days, the collective focus is on asserting control and, of course, leadership, but from a place of um, love, right? From a place of love, from a place of determined use of our authority. Okay. It's not a bad thing to use your willpower. It's definitely not a bad thing to use determination. This will be all about harnessing the power to influence and guide ourselves and others towards our goal, a vision, right? If we're using it positively. When we use it in the negative, we're using it to dominate, right? Or to push someone or to push ourselves even into something. All right. So, when we are dealing with the willpower center, that center actually is only defined or colored in for 1/8 of the population. Just 1/8 of us. I do have it defined. I have willpower. I have determination. You might also call it stubborn. The other 7/8 of you out there do not have this center defined. So you're often being influenced by others who have willpower, taking it in, you're amplifying it and rebroadcasting willpower, trying to make it sustainable in a way that it is not for you, right? So this can be a very big trouble spot in your human design. So we want to take a look at, well, what is it that we are here to learn about the will center, right? Now, one other thing I wanted to note as well, that while the sun is moving through the gate 21 of control, we have three things, two for sure, three things. The eclipse will be here, that are sitting at the gate 51, also on the willpower, the will center. So if you take a look at your own human design, let's say, for example, you have the gate 26 defined and maybe the gate 40 defined. The fact that transiting planets are at 51 and 21 tells you you have a very full house of energies on that will center. If that will center is open for you, it'll be very tempting for you to use the will incorrectly, right? Not in the right way for yourself and leading you to burnout. On the other hand, for those of you who have it defined, you can also burn out during this time because there's so much energy available on the will center. And what's sitting here at 51 next week, the sun. So on April 4th, the sun sits here. And remember, we talked about on Wednesday during the Astro Inklings for April, we talked about the fact that the solar eclipse will be at the gate 51. And the significance here is that the 51 is the gate of shock and awakening, right? The shakeups that happen in our lives that awaken us to moving on to a new way of being. It can be good shock. It doesn't. have to always be negative shock. It can be very positive, but shock. And as well, we have Chiron here. Chiron healing the awakening process. And the North Node is here. The North Node is destiny. Remember, we've been on this for a while. We don't end the North Node at the 51 until May. So all of you need to pay attention to this little center because there's so much energy coming through it at this moment. So let's take a look at what the will center is. So, for one thing, all of the centers have the potential for creating conundrums in our life. So, a conundrum is where we have what seemingly we have to hold the energy of two conflicting things, right? The go and the stop, right? Putting your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time, which spins the wheels, kind of thing, right? So this energy can be very um, difficult, especially the younger you are, the more difficult this energy, right? The older you are, the wiser you've become, right? So then you are getting sort of the drift of how am I supposed to be using this energy, even if you don't know human design, right? We're still always getting wiser in our older age, or typically we're getting wiser. Now, the energy centers really affect us because that's where we get our type and our authority, right? Depending on what centers. These are centers, these geometric shapes. These are called centers. And depending on which ones are defined, it tells us your type and your authority. Whether they are defined or open tells us whether you have access to consistent energy if they're defined, or inconsistent energy if it's open, right? Inconsistently having access to the energies that flow through that center. It is going to tell us whether you are here to broadcast energy in the case of it being defined or colored in, or are you receiving and amplifying energy as it comes in? So, broadcasting versus expressing energies, kind of thing. There is conditioning in the centers, right? Especially in your open centers, because the open centers are where you're taking in the energy from around you and amplifying it, rebroadcasting it, believing it to be your own energy, but perhaps it's not, right? Especially, say, like an open emotional center where you're taking in the emotion from everybody around you. You tend to amplify that energy and rebroadcast it. And it might not even be your own emotions that you're broadcasting, that you're feeling. Okay. So having that happen hijacks your decision making processes, it hijacks your behavior patterns, and using that energy that isn't yours and not realizing it means that you can get conditioned in your responses to life, to how you look at life, to how you make decisions, to how you move forward in your life, how you stay stuck in your life, right? It could be very much in your centers the reason why you're stuck or you feel like you're in a rut. It can be very much in your centers when everything you do blows up in your face, right? Because you're not using the centers, you're not aware of the centers perhaps and their impact on you. So when we're looking at the will center then, because that's where we started here at this will center or heart center, and sometimes it's called the ego center. It is all about willpower and ego. And as well, what else lives here are material resources, including money. So, this is a center that if someone is having trouble with abundance or lack or money issues, power struggles with money, this is the center we're going to look at first, interestingly enough, right? And there are other places in the chart where money lives. There are other places in the chart to look for problems around money or abundance. But the first place I always look is that center, the will center, because here is where we manage and allocate our resources. So our time, our energy, our money, right? People, humans, in the sense of say a company managing their resource, their human resources, right? This is also the center where we hold value. So it's very sort of Venus-like in astrology, where Venus is the planet that helps us realize our values. and our worth. So this is the value of things in our lives. How do we value what we value? Why do we value what we value? Right? If you have an open will center and you value, let's say, a hard work ethic, I would ask you to ask yourself, whose work ethic is it? Is it yours? Is it the ethic of the outer world? Is it someone in your family, say a mother or father, who had a defined will perhaps and had a very hard idea of what a work ethic is? And now you're trying to uphold that work ethic and it isn't even you, right? So, what's the value that we place on things? And also, in some respects, self worth, right? And the value we place upon ourselves. Now, it is a center also when it's defined that empowers others and can motivate others, right? To move forward, to see, where it is that they're using their energy incorrectly. And this center holds a lot of tribal energy. Tribal energy in human design is the energy of it's the energy of love, right? And how we love one another in relationships and how we come together, different tribes, different communities, different states, different countries, how we come together to work to the good of the or the common people or the common good. And never forget, ever, 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 even if this is colored in your chart, that this center works to rest. It pulses on and it pulses off. Okay, that's the biggest problem with having this center defined because it adds, let's say you have this center defined and you have it defined with a defined sacral, right? Say you're a generator or a manifesting generator. You can keep going and going and going, missing the signs that your body says it needs to rest, right? So we got to be watchful here of this energy. And again, only 1/8 of the population out there has this defined. So if you have it defined, you're the rarity right here. Now, if you have this center open, meaning it would be white, it wouldn't be colored in like this. It would look like, one of the other centers here that are white. You're here to learn to be wise about value, about resources, about business, and about managing the material world, managing things in the material world, wisdom about it, wisdom about when to take action and when not to, right? The open center amplifies the willpower of other people. So if you have a family, let's say you have a family of 4 and one person has the willpower defined, then that person's willpower is being transmitted to everybody in the family. And the people who have it open are taking in the willpower and amplifying it and rebroadcasting it. So it can be a place of sheer hard-headedness of that keeping going and going or trying to, but not able to sustain that, right? They may become pushy and stubborn and stuck in their ways. It's not sustainable. Um, if you have this center open, you question the value that you have. You question your worth, your lovability, even in some senses, although that's more in the G center, the identity center. But you may question your value in the family, your value as an employee. All of that is uh, questions that you might have about yourself. You may also feel a need to prove yourself. This is a center of competition. And when this center is open, you're taking in this need to compete with others while maybe there's no one else out there that you're competing with. There's no need to compete, but the center can be one when it's open that draws you into competing for resources, competing in a sense of I want to win, right? I want to be number one. Somehow your value and your worth gets mixed up in competition, competing for that placement. And the one thing I can tell you, if you have an open center here, which most of you do not make promises. Don't make them. Be a little bit less willing to say, I promise you I'll be there at 5 o'clock on Friday, because something might happen that you can't. So you say, I'm going to do my best to be there at 5 o'clock on Friday, but I can't make any promises, right? Because the energy here, remember, pulses on and pulses off, and you're sensitive to that, especially when you have the center open. All right. And again, this is important because right now, these different gates, the 51 and the 21, are both defined. So if you have those gates already defined on your chart from birth, it amps up the energy of the planet that happens to sit there. I saw in a note somewhere, I think it was you, Pam, said that, what's it, gate Jupiter, both Jupiters are at gate 21 and 51. It's big for you, right? This is big for you. There is something about wisdom here that you're learning, becoming your own mistress of your life, right? And choosing how you're going to put yourself out there into the world, how you're going to use your energy. And Pam, I remember correctly, you're also a projector. So you do not have access to the sacral center. So you're going to need to be very wise about using this energy, particularly if this center is open and becomes defined by something that's transiting. And even if it doesn't, that's just a lot of energy sitting there, just waiting to be called out of you and put into motion. So take care. Don't make promises. Don't make promises that you can't keep. Okay. Now, let's move on over here to the Earth in this next week. So while the Sun will be sitting at gate 21, the Earth is going to be sitting at the gate 48. And as we've talked about briefly, I don't know that we've really gone too deep into it. Every year at this time, from the last week of March-ish all the way to the first week in May, the Earth transits through all of the gates of the spleen. Just like in the last week of September to the first week in November, the Sun transits through the gates of the spleen. So we have 2 times in the year where the energy of this center is being triggered for all of us. And this is a center for time, intuition, health and well-being, survival, right? Intuition being instinctual almost, right? The instinct to survive. So while the planets transit through these different gates on the spleen, and even if you have them already defined, some of them are triggers to fear, right? It's fear and paralysis in those gates in the negative, where in the positive, you bust through the fear and you do it anyway, and you shine and you move towards success, because the ultimate energy in this center is about success. Okay. Now, the gate 48 is called the gate of wisdom, and it is associated with our instincts, our inner knowingness, our survival energy. And it's a period of time where we need to be grounded in the potential for our deep insights and intuitive knowing. So the gate 48 is one where in the I Ching it's called the well, right? Because it shows us that everything that we know is deep within us. So there's a period of time during this week then where there's this potential for deep insights and intuitive understanding, regarding all things to do with health, with survival, well-being, with the impact that fear plays in our lives. And the gate 48 being about wisdom through experience. Now, that's the interesting thing, too. This is not just knowing in the mind. It is about experiences that have also contributed to our knowingness. So I always think of this gate as the doctor who spends, a couple of years in book learning about diseases, about pharmacology, about the body and the muscles and the tissues and how everything works together. But then they have to go, their education can't be complete there because it's only one level. They have to go into a hospital or doctor office or clinical situation so they can see it in action, so they can apply their knowledge. So the gate 48 is about learning from experiences. The experiences that we have had in the past, because that lives here, right? Sometimes the past is here. And tapping into what you know from past experiences that can help you move forward, right? The spleen operates in the now. It doesn't really operate in the past. Nothing can. There's no breath or life in the past anymore. It's in the past. And there's no breath in the future yet. It hasn't occurred. So we can't live in the future. We only live here in the now. So the spleen keeps us in the now. The gate 48 tells us about how to apply the wisdom that we have experienced perhaps from the past to a situation here in the now that will help us for the future, right? It encourages us to have deep trust in our inner knowing. The earth is grounding us, remember? So, one way to overcome the tendency of the sun to control is to understand that you are a deep well of knowingness. That's the earth giving us that. And that we can make decisions on that wisdom. And again, that's going to apply to your authority in your human design, whether that's the right way for you to do things or not. With the earth at gate 48, then we may find ourselves particularly attuned to our instincts and to our intuition. Now, for some of you, if you are emotionally defined and you are meant to wait for emotional clarity, this could be a confusing time as your intuition may be speaking and telling you, take that action, do this, right? And if it's a big decision in your life, you need to default to your authority if it's emotional and wait for clarity. But the little day to day decisions for all of us, even those who have the spleen defined, can be made through your instinct or your intuition, the small voice inside that says, no, not now, or wait till tomorrow, whatever it says, right? There's potential for profound insights during this week to arise around our health and our safety, our practical matters revolving around survival, particularly if we have been in fear around those things in our lives. It's time it's a time for us to listen to our gut, right? Our gut feelings, paying attention to the subtle signs from the body that can lead us to be wise about the choices we make, and maybe even lead us to some understanding, more understanding about the world around us. So the 48 in the fear side is called inadequacy. And it could be a driver of our acquiring more and more knowledge. It could be a driver of our never actually launching a business, launching a book, launching our lives because we don't know enough. I need another certification. I need another class. I need another fill in the blank. I need to read this book first. Putting off, if you will, um, the experience of what we've learned in the world because we're too afraid that we don't know enough to do it. All right. So be watchful for that. Now, let's take a look then at the spleen center and what that looks like or means for people who have it defined and who have it opened. So, um, when it's defined, meaning it's colored in, so it would look sort of like this. By the way, here's the gate 48. It's on the outer ring, and that is where the earth is sitting. The defined center is about survival, time, intuition, immunity, right? Your immune system lives here. It is feel good energy, especially when we think of well being, right? Being healthy, vital, being able to move freely and do the things that we want to do. And it's grounded in the now. So people who have the spleen defined are very much people who are aware of time and who live in the now. And yet, people with this defined can be grounded in fear and lack as well, based on whatever it is that's defined, right? The fears in the spleen, when the spleen is defined, even if it's open and it becomes defined by something, needs to be pushed through or moved through. We're in human design, we say, feel the fear and do it anyway, right? It's the sense of don't let the fear stop you, right? Especially if they're ungrounded fears, like the fear of not being good enough, not being in the know, the fear of the past repeating itself, the fear of success or failure. Those are false evidence appearing real fears. But if you're walking down a dark alley and the prickles or hackles on your neck go up, pay attention to those. Those are truly survival fears, right? The fear something's going to come out of the dark and get me. Um, so unfortunately, because we don't live in a world anymore where we have to fear that a saber-toothed tiger or a woolly mammoth is going to come and eat us, or that we won't survive the winter, or that we won't be able to get through the cold seasons. Um, those fears morphed. They morphed into these other things, a fear of public speaking, for example, a fear of not having enough, a fear of not being perfect, all those, right? And those are on the spleen. And the only way to work with that is to push through them, to feel the fear, acknowledge it. I understand I'm afraid of doing this. I'm afraid that I might fail. I understand that, but I'm going to do it anyway, right? I'm going to do this. Now, if you have an open spleen, it's the opposite, right? You have a sensitive immune system, and you might struggle to be on time, or you're very aware, oh my gosh, right? You know what I do? I have an open spleen, and I'm often preparing, like I did this morning, all this information, thinking that I was going to be able to get it all out to you. And I'm looking at 4 minutes now until the show should be over. And I'm actually doing pretty good, but I over prepare, right? So time for me is kind of weird. I don't quite get it, right? I don't understand how much I can actually do in a time. So when we say we're struggling to be on time, it might mean that you're uber aware of having to leave at a certain time in order to be somewhere at a certain time, that kind of thing. But you're here to become wise about healing, about health, about what it means to feel good in your body, about well being, right? You're here to become wise about time. You're also maybe medically intuitive, especially about your own body, right? Where you just sense something's off. I need to go see the doctor. And then it turns out, yes, of course, you needed to take this vitamin, or you needed to do this particular thing. You might also be medically intuitive about others, right? That happens with the open spleen as well. The tendency in an open spleen is to hold on to things too long, people, things, grievances, emotions, way longer than you should. So sometimes this can be a factor in hoarding, in holding on to useless bits of paper and things that you might never use. I see this often in people who who was it that I was with one time, and they had all of these things that they thought they would use in crafts at some point in time. So there were beads, and there were baubles, and there were pieces of paper and pens and pencils and all of this that they kept and never used, right? That is an open spleen. Um, so holding on to things that are not necessary, holding on to things too long, and the fears of the spleen here also need to be moved through, whichever ones are defined. So, for those of you who don't have, let's say you have an open spleen and now the gate 48 becomes defined, you may become inordinately feeling a fear around inadequacy, not knowing enough, not being good enough, right? So, you want to be aware if you don't have the spleen, if you have the spleen defined and none that gate isn't defined, now you suddenly have another energy on the spleen to be aware of. All right. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen here. Go back and see if there's questions. Um, two of my girls from memory have it defined. That's what JLo says. Pam says mother, both sisters had the will center. Ugh for a projector. Definitely, because you're drawing in their willpower, you're drawing in their determination, right? And that if you act on that consistently, and especially as a child, you might have been very likely to, and growing up and moving away, maybe still thinking I need to behave in this way, it could really lead to burnout. being fatigued and tired, not feeling energized around doing anything anymore. And of course, the need for rest, right? Christine says, I have a defined heart, spleen, and sacral. I've shied away from competition. Open throat, 45 earth, hanging gate to the 21. So now you have that defined to the throat. So, what are you becoming wise about in terms of how you use your energy and how you use your resources? All of that can be very positive. Let's see what else I would say. Let's see. Oh, I have gate 16.6 in my IQ. Will connect. How can that affect me? So, uh, IQ is the 16 is called the gate in quantum human design. We call it zest, right? I think of it as enthusiasm, right? The gate 16 is enthusiastic about things. Now, having it connect with the 48 can overcome using it could have a tendency to use enthusiasm to do things rather than having knowledge or a knowledge base or the experience base to do things, right? So you want to be careful that you don't get carried away and in enthusiasm to do something or to be something or to engage in something that you really don't have any experience in, right? I can enthusiastically think, yes, I want to go bungee jumping, but since I've never experienced that, I am afraid of heights. Is that wise for me to do that without having had the experience maybe of, you know, seeing others do that or being present to that energy? So, not that I'm saying you're going to need to go that you want to go bungee jumping or anything, but that's just um, a sample of what that can do. Your enthusiasm getting carried away. So, all right. I don't see now I'll be more aware asking myself the yes and the no, right? Right? And it doesn't have to be drastic like bungee jumping. It can be, I'm enthusiastic about learning more about this subject and I leap into the first opportunity or I go find that opportunity and then I end up wearing myself out. So you got to be you have to be aware of your energies and how they work. All right. So hopefully this has been helpful for everybody. If you have questions, you know where to reach me, Janet at living-astrology.com. Bring your questions to the morning show. I'm happy to answer them. I wish you all a blessed weekend, a blessed Easter. Celebrate, have fun, be with family. I will see you on Monday. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.